Hi everyone! In this video I want to show my settings for American Truck Simulator and European Truck Simulator for VR so that I get my target frame rate of 80 frames per second. First we will take a look at the settings in Steam, which is over here. You see I've opened American Truck Simulator, will be the same for European Truck Simulator. For the rest of the video, whenever I say American Truck Simulator, the same is true for European Truck Simulator and vice versa. Just don't want to repeat the names of the game not twice every time I mention one of those. Over here in this window there's the advanced start options, obviously because I'm running the game in VR on an Valve Index. I have the Open VR starting options, and then I also have these two other starting options. That's not really necessary for a vanilla game, but because I have a lot of RAM available, I decided to add those anyway. So these add slightly larger size and number for the temporary buffers the game uses. It's not maxed out. I feel that the game runs a little bit smoother with this, especially when you get into areas where the game needs to load up a lot of assets, and so I've added those and kept those. The next thing is some options I did in the global config file. You will find the global config file in your systems, on your systems directory under users, your name, documents, American Truck Simulator or European Truck Simulator. And here probably the most important setting that I have changed is this one at the bottom. I have set this to 0, which from what I have researched disables this function. And this function seems to be the cause, at least on my system, was the cause for occasional stutters in the game where the game literally stopped itself. So the game was running fine, you know, a green line, 80 FPS, and then for some reason the FPS suddenly and the frame time suddenly just got worse and increasingly worse, and then all of a sudden got back to a green line. And after I did a little bit of research on stuttering, this seems to be a setting, an option that also causes some effects on normal screens with high refresh rates. And so I thought, give it a try, and surprisingly, after I disabled this function, the game ran a lot smoother. So the next thing then, which is important for myself, are these 4 settings. With these values, you can adjust the position of your in-game helper window. And with the values you see over here, I have moved that window to my 2 o'clock low and slightly tilted it back a little bit. Another setting that you might have seen in other guides for VR, I have not touched in the game, and this is which is the American Truck Simulator manual pixel density setting. I have tried it out, but found that it has a very negative effect on performance, because the notches you can go up until you see an improvement in visual quality, you will lose a lot of performance while you do that. And so I actually kept that at 1.0, which is the default value, and the game to me looks fine so far. In Steam VR I have resolution set to 150%, so I already have some good amount of pixel density available, and so I simply let that at the default value. And then the next And last option I did in the config file is, where do we have it? This over here. Buffer page size, which again should not have a big impact or any impact if you run the game without mods. The default value is 10. I decided, because I have enough RAM, I will just increase that to 30. And also this, in my opinion, slightly improves smoothing and loading of the game. And with that, we are finished. This is the last setting in the config file. And now we can go and take a look in the in-game settings. And here we are now in-game and looking at the in-game graphic settings. Obviously we are not in VR, so that I have a more stable picture and you can easily read all options and not my head wiggling around all the time focusing on different parts of the screen. We will make a quick run through. In the top, these options don't have a real impact on VR because resolution, refresh rate and vertical synchronization is all done by your VR headset itself and the application it runs. More important are the settings under advanced graphical settings. I will not go on every setting here, but I will just go on those which I fiddled around most and where I found that they have the greatest impact on frame time and FPS, and so I want to show you which setting I have, why I have it that way, and why this might be different from recommendations you see in other videos. So keep in mind, my aim was to have the game running steadily at 80 FPS. So my aim was not to have the most beautiful game, but to have a game that is running very smoothly. And so, for instance, scaling, which is another option for pixel density or super sampling more or less, I have chosen to go with 100% scaling. I have tried higher values like 125, 150. I've done the same experiments as I've done with the pixel density setting in the config file, but I always found that the increase in visual quality is low compared to the high amount of performance I lose. And so in the end I said, okay, I already run Steam VR setting at 150% resolution, so I can get away with in-game scaling set at default value of 100%. Now the game still looked a little bit edgy, and so I played around with the anti-aliasing setting, and I found if I put that to medium, I get rid of a lot of the aliasing I saw in the game at a very little performance cost, and that's why I decided to go with medium here. I think if you set this to high, the performance loss gets a lot bigger for, again, a little increase in additional visual quality. Then probably the biggest one in here, also scaling is also a very big one, but another big one is SSAO. Usually I really like this option. In most of the games I play, I have this activated, and I try to have this in virtual reality also. In ATS and ETS2 I found that this option does not really do a lot in virtual reality, but if you have it enabled, it costs a lot of FPS. I think this disabling this alone gave me 1 to 1.5 milliseconds frame time. And this is a lot if you look at the frames per second we are aiming here. So, really important one. Can just recommend this if you don't run top of the line graphic cards like a 4080 or 4090. Disable this. I run a 4070, so I'm not far from that. Depth of field, don't need that in VR. Sun shafts, color correction, that's to my liking. Reflection scaling, I think it's the default value. Reflection detail is set to medium, but not for performance reasons. I can easily run the game at high, but I don't like the look when the reflection detail is at high. I find the game then to be a little bit too shiny, too glossy, too reflective, and so I decided to reduce that to medium for my visual liking. All the other settings here are set to high. The only one that really has a big impact I found is shadow quality. And I decided to go with high. I might get away with it set to ultra, but I like a little headroom, so I've set this to high. The rest, mirror resolution and mirror distance, that's probably important. Here I've actually decided against performance and for visual quality. And in this case, because I'm looking so often into the mirrors while playing in VR, that I want the mirror image to match the outside world, and that's why I have set both resolution and distance to high, and got away with, because I've got enough performance headroom out of the other options. Anisotropic filtering, that's just set by habit to 8. I've never run in any game 16 and never noticed a difference. These are all toggled on. And the last thing here is light visibility ranges. This is set to medium, which is allows me to run my FPS, but I have to admit this will give you, for the street lights, some visual at night, some visual impact, because at medium you will clearly see when the game starts to render the street lights. If you set it to high, the render distance for the light is far greater, but especially if you move into cities, I found it is not worth the performance loss. And with this, we're actually through all my settings, and now we can hop over into the second part, where we will run a short trip with FPS VR in the top right of the corner, and we'll show you how the FPS behave in-game and how stable they actually are. Hello folks! Now we are in the game, and actually we are ready to start our little showcase trip. But before I start the trip, let me add one thing about settings. I have disabled motion smoothing in Steam VR, because I found that with motion smoothing disabled, in ATS and ETS2 I get a better and more fluid experience, because with the motion smoothing enabled, I found it to kick in pretty hard, then limiting your frame rate to half your refresh rate, so 40 FPS, and causing artifacts. While if I have it disabled, there will be dips in the FPS, sometimes as bad as like to 55 or 50, but those dips are so short that overall the experience is better with motion smoothing disabled. So with that being said, now we're ready to start. You see the engine is running, trailer is loaded. What we will do is we will do a trip from Provo to Cedar City in Utah. And I've chosen this route for a reason, because this is actually the worst performing area I found anywhere in ATS. So this is basically the bottom line, the worst possible performance I will get with my settings. Pretty much anywhere else I was so far, I experienced better performance. You will note you should have the FPS, VR FPS VR, that way, in the top right corner of the screen, and you can see both the GPU and the CPU frame times. And one thing that you will notice is that
Mostly, if there are issues with the performance, they are not caused by the GPU, but for some reason the game, ETS is the same as the American Truck Simulator in this case, will run into CPU limitations. And it should, and that's the reason why I've chosen that area, it should start pretty much right after we left our starting point. And you can already see how the CPU frame time is going nuts. And you will also see the effect on my frames. Currently, so we are at 60, 65-ish, something around that. And that's what I meant with it. I have motion smoothing disabled. In this area, with these limits on the CPU, with the motion smoothing activated, I would actually see a drop to 40 FPS with some visual artifacts. Now you will see stuttering probably, and I will also notice stuttering, but it's way smoother than with the motion smoothing activated. I don't really know why that is. Probably it's about how SteamVR and the Valve Index use this reprojection method they call motion smoothing. I owned an Oculus Quest Oculus Quest before I owned the Index, and there I found reprojection working slightly better. So, but now you can already see it. We are pretty much back at 80 FPS stable, 2 green lines. So nothing we can say about this. With this huge trailer, this will be, oh no, on the right side. So let that guy pass. That guy is braking, good. So, and here again, we change the direction and you see the limit on the CPU. And for some reason, Utah is one of the areas where that's happened frequently. Other maps, especially like California, basically, if I drive around in California, nothing like this happens, even in cities. And here, that's why I have chosen this route. It's not particularly long, it's about 180 miles, but on that, basically every crossing we will hit, you will see those dips in performance. I now forgot I will show this when we get the next dip, that when I switch to the outside view, this normally will just go away. So, using, you know... Whee! Should be a little bit more careful about using outside view. And here, stable, 2 green lines. And now we see this again, and now we can try it. If I go to the outside view, you will see this basically disappears, which for me usually would indicate it has something to do with the mirrors, but it does not. I don't know why that is. because it's also not sure if one can demonstrate this. It seems to be sensitive to the direction in which I look. And you see here, going to the outside view, pretty much gone away. So this should give a nice screenshot. But overall, you see our average FPS is still almost 80. And from now on, I won't switch back to outside view until we hit our destination. So using outside view will not have an effect on the rest of this showcase. You should also see now total resolution setting I have is 150% or 2400 something to 2700 something. So we have a pretty good level of super sampling altogether if we look at the native resolution of the Valve Index. And that's also something one should keep in mind. You cannot really beat the physical limitations of your headset. So crazy amounts of pixel density, super sampling, you sometimes see recommended at just a waste of performance and energy. You should, usually what I do is I choose a solid super sampling level that works for most games. And then if I have a game making some trouble, I will look at super sampling usually first and test how the effect is on the visual quality. And if you do some testing in this area, you will usually see that if you are getting close to a pixel count in total of 2 times, 3 times the native resolution of your HMD, you won't really see an increase in quality. Or let's say you only see a very tiny increase in quality for a very huge amount of performance loss. And so always keep in mind the combined pixel density super sampling you achieve for a game, for an application, and not just go crazy on like the in-game settings and then wondering why you don't get a fluid and smooth in-game experience. The fun part is actually at the moment the frame times even indicate that we could probably run the game at 90 FPS. But I like to have a little bit of a headroom, you know? The difference between, in such a slow game like American Truck Simulator, the difference between having 80 FPS, 80 Hertz, and having 90 FPS or 90 Hertz is not really noticeable. At least for me, so, and I'm pretty sensitive to breaks in FPS. That's why I, in the first place, aim to have, you know, as few of reprojection as I possibly can. So 30 miles to go, 40 in-game minutes, so it's not far. And you see here on open land, it's basically nothing. I'm not sure if we get another crossing before we actually arrive at Cedar City. But Cedar City will be again like, you will immediately see the CPU frame time go crazy. That's also one thing I noticed is in games where the CPU seems to be the problem, disabling motion smoothing is more beneficial If I have a GPU limitation, which ATS pretty much is not, the motion smoothing is probably a good option. Because it seems when the CPU is the limit, the frame rates seem to stay more stable compared to when a game or application is running into the GPU limit. Then immediately you will see the drop in FPS. And here, if you take a good look on the FPS VR graphs, you will see that when there are some hiccups on the CPU line, but the GPU line stays well in the green, then usually the game will still be displayed at 80 FPS. So now it's going again, and you see pretty much going crazy like this. But you also can see how it's not so bad as one could think. So here we are 71, 72. And just 3 miles to go. And now again, pretty quickly, 2 green lines. We see if we already take a little look at the we have 18 minutes of gameplay, we have average FPS of 78 and reprojection ratio of 6.2%, which is pretty good. And from what I've seen, at least, I have to keep my eyes on the road, so cannot constantly look down on the performance graph. I don't think we were at 40 FPS, something like that. Only for very brief moments. So, just 1 mile to go. I hope this video helps all you VR users to get a very fluent experience in American Truck Simulator and European Truck Simulator. Hope this solves some of the issues you might run into, so you really can enjoy the game like I do. And I have really to say, I'm surprised how this old game engine performs in VR. This is also, again, a good situation where I think you see how the GPU here actually gets something in the orange, but we stay pretty solid in the FPS. And that's, again, a situation where motion smoothing, because it's so aggressive, would most likely limit your FPS to 40 FPS and then create the other 40 frames, causing some issues. So as this is only a demo run, when we arrive over at our destination, I will spare you the delivery parking in. That will be too long for this video. So, all in all, I think now, standing at that traffic light, now getting a little bit more of reprojection, but we're still average FPS 78. So. Almost caused a traffic accident there. So, reaching our destination. Ooh, ooh. Oh no, come on, not a train again. So. Okay, so now 2 green lines again. You can check around. If I look over there, you see those spikes, and if you look over there, nothing happens. So in the end, yeah, because we stood here and parked for a pretty long time, we got like to reprojection ratio of 8%, average FPS 78, still very good in my opinion, 2 frames away from our target frames. Gosh, is this train going slow? Luckily it's not as long as US trains used to be in real life. As I said before, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope especially it was helpful for those of you struggling a little bit with the performance and the smoothness of American Truck Simulator and European Truck Simulator in VR. We are now arriving at our destination, and so I will say let's get into the outside view, have a nice end screen here, and I say have fun, happy gaming folks, bye bye, and see you again here in the future.